Please welcome Eapen Thampy.
It is an honor to be here. Thank you for. Right. Thank you. Can you hear me now? Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. As was noted, I'm the director of a nonprofit organization that works to reform America's asset forfeiture laws. And asset forfeiture laws are property seizure laws. They're laws that allow the government to seize property from people, often without the benefit of a trial, conviction, or even sometimes an arrest, obtaining a warrant, or finding contraband in a search. And the other thing about the forfeiture laws is that they allow law enforcement to self-fund their own activities. They allow government to become disconnected from that system of democratic accountability that begins with people casting ballots for representatives, and those representatives making laws and funding those laws through appropriations. We've lost the power of the purse in the war on drugs, and that's one of the great casualties that I'm involved in explaining and hopefully changing. And that's the other truth about the war on drugs. Not just that it's a dismal, cataclysmic failure, but that it is a profoundly undemocratic one. It is a symptom of a broken government. It's a system of a government that's lost the connection between what the people want, desire, and need, and the systems and entities that profit from this prohibition and the enforcement of that prohibition. In a sense, the forfeiture laws are the teeth of prohibition. They allow the law enforcement to fund prohibition enforcement that taxpayers are not willing to pay for. If we didn't have the system, we would be forced to have a far more honest governmental discussion about the war on drugs and how to pay for it. We don't have that choice right now. We don't have that discussion right now. And that's a choice, and that's a discussion that its absence is profoundly undemocratic. It robs every single one of us of that choice. I want to talk about the effects of the war on drugs. I want to talk about some of the things I've seen across the country. A couple of years ago, in the town that I consider my hometown, Columbia, Missouri, we saw a SWAT raid. They acquired the video from the police. The police made this for training purposes, and they had gotten an informant's tip that there was marijuana in this house. So they raided this house at 8 o'clock at night. The mother and a 7-year-old child was there. They arrested the father in front of the family and shot both of the dogs. And the video got tremendous international attention. And it was really it was really a picture to draw people of how the system worked. The people in that town of Columbia didn't want to fund that kind of enforcement. They didn't want a paramilitary squad enforcing nonviolent search warrants. They didn't want law enforcement that was so incentivized by the idea that they could walk into someone's house and rip it apart to find not really the drugs, because they don't really care so much about the drugs, as we found out. They are looking for the money, and if they don't find the money, maybe they can take the house. And this is a kind of deal that happens all over the country. In 2 days, in Ogden, Utah, I'm following a case where a young Iraq veteran was sleeping at home on January 4th. And his ex-girlfriend actually was the informant who told the police that he was growing marijuana in his house. His father claims that he had PTSD from his service abroad and that he had maybe 9 or 10 plants. Regardless, they raided his house at night, and he's been in a war zone. He sleeps with a 9mm under his pillow, and there was a firefight. Now, this is a drug task force in Ogden, Utah, that is one of the most vicious and brutal drug task forces in the country. They've killed people before. It's on YouTube. Look it up. Todd Blair. They raid this guy for marijuana, or I believe it was marijuana, but they come in at night, and this man comes out of his bedroom with a golf club, and they shoot him dead. So this is this is a task force that seizes millions of dollars a year in highway interdictions with dogs. Whether or not there's drugs present, that doesn't matter. And from affairs like this, where they raid the house, and not only is the prosecutor pursuing charges because there was a firefight and officers and Mr. Searle were shot. No one knows who shot who. The ballistics haven't been released yet, months after this entire event. And of course, there's a lot of speculation that that some of the injuries were friendly fire. But regardless, this situation happens on a daily basis across the country, and people are put in tremendously unjust positions. If we were to eliminate forfeiture as a revenue incentive for law enforcement, if we were to fund enforcement operations from tax dollars and through the democratic accountability that our system is supposed to provide, we wouldn't have paramilitary raids across the country. Radley Balco's SWAT raid map at the Cato Institute wouldn't have so many pinpricks across it. We wouldn't have the stories of dead dogs and traumatized families that we see almost every day. And not just that. I see the potential, I've been fortunate to speak with people across the country, from Massachusetts to Maine to California and Oregon and in Missouri. And there's a great desire for a reevaluation of how we govern ourselves. We want to, there's a great desire for the founding principles that we were founded upon. Governor Gary Johnson says that the people who run America today have a far different idea of liberty than the people who founded it. And nowhere, I believe, is that more true than the effects of the war on drugs. Here in Colorado, it's a really exciting time. I would have not believed it 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I was in high school, and I was seeing them bring dogs in to search children and question them and turn them into informants and expose them to the criminal justice system for marijuana or maybe for an aspirin. The zero-tolerance laws are fairly harsh. But, I wouldn't have believed it back then that we could get marijuana legalization, the end of prohibition, to this point. I couldn't have imagined it, but here we are. And it's indicative of how far that the mainstream politicians and our government have strayed from what we want. Today, I received a couple forwards from friends, from sympathetic friends in both the Republican and the Democrat local parties, indicating, hey, Gary Johnson is speaking at this rally today. We need to come and wave our signs and make sure that marijuana decriminalization or deregulation is not an issue that they can use to take our votes away. And I thought to myself, that is an odd way to phrase it. They're not Barack Obama's votes. They're not Mitt Romney's votes. They're not the votes that these institutions, these failed and bankrupt institutions, are entitled to. They're our votes. I met Governor Gary Johnson a couple of years ago in Joplin, Missouri. You might have remembered the tornado that went through that town. It was a tremendous response from all over the country that's allowed them to stand back on their feet. But before that tornado went through, the good folks at Joplin Normal invited me down to their cannabis revival. And lo and behold, there's a Republican, back then he was a Republican, campaigning for President of the United States named Gary Johnson. And that's when I began hearing about this conversation. I knew who Ron Paul was, of course, but I hadn't understood. I hadn't known that there was an advocate for liberty who went beyond what even then I believe Ron Paul was willing to offer. Equal marriage rights, the end to the war on drugs, a reevaluation of the policies of militarism and bureaucratism and corporatism that President Eisenhower warned us way back when. The military-industrial complex, the drug war industrial complex. Maybe with the emergence of technology and new ways of communication and the awakening of the liberty message in the American people, we can create the people industrial complex. That would be something.
Yeah.
If marijuana legalization passes in Colorado, in Washington, or in Oregon, it will be a monumental step forward. I have friends in Honduras who see the effects, the corrosive effects of the war on drugs every day. There is a congressional investigation into asking why the DEA is involved in extrajudicial killings of foreign nationals on Honduran soil. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it was Plan Colombia. We were using chemical and biological weapons to destroy the rainforest so that people couldn't grow the crops that they needed to sustain themselves, so that indigenous people couldn't live on their own lands, so that we could enforce our prohibition. At what cost? If we move forward on this issue here and now, and not just if we pass Amendment 64 or any of the other propositions, but if we get Gary Johnson that 5% that we need to move forward in 2016, we can push that message of liberty and push these principles and push this reevaluation of what we want to be as a country, what we want to represent, the choices that we are willing to make. We can forward that to a greater stage. It is a shame that Governor Johnson and Judge Gray have been excluded from the debates, from the honest conversation that the American people want to have about how they're governed. This is not the America of Barack Obama. This is not the America of Mitt Romney. We don't have to go down the path that we've been led on for the past 30, 40 years. We can do better. We can continue to confront our neighbors and our friends and even the people who don't like us, even the people who we disagree with. We can continue confronting them with the truth, that America's strength comes from the vitality and the spirit and the expression and the soul of a free people. And there is nothing on the world, there is nothing in this life that can compare to that. I haven't voted. I haven't gotten my ballot yet, but I intend on mailing it in as soon as I pick it up. But I know I'll be voting for Gary Johnson, and I hope that over the course of the next couple of years, over the course of the next 4 years, over the next 8 years, over the next decade, that we continue to infiltrate all of these institutions with our message, with the message that we can live free. And that's one of the and for all those reasons, because I see that we can do better, that we have a higher destiny, that we can achieve a more perfect union, that I'm supporting Governor Johnson this year. And I want to thank them for having me, and I want to say, we'll get them.
Eapen Thampy.